The celebration before the storm. The war was finally over, or at least that was what the people of the Galactic Coalition believed. Across the capital world of Veralia, fireworks burst in the night sky, painting the clouds with streaks of gold and silver. The streets were filled with music, laughter, and the sound of victory bells echoing from the grand towers. After years of bloody conflict against the Zarnak Empire, the Coalition fleet had returned home, claiming complete triumph. Commander Larev stood on the balcony of the High Hall, looking down at the sea of cheering faces. He had led the final assault himself, breaking the last Zarnak stronghold. In his mind, there was no force left in the galaxy that could challenge the Coalition. Behind him, the council members exchanged proud smiles, their victory speeches ready. "Today," Larev began, his voice carrying over the plaza, "we have secured peace for generations to come." The crowd erupted with applause. Children waved flags, merchants handed out free food, and veterans marched proudly through the streets. The war had been long and cruel, but tonight the galaxy celebrated. Far above the celebrations, in the quiet void of space, a single battered scout ship limped toward Veralia. Its hull was scorched, its engines flickered weakly, and its comm system crackled with static inside. The pilot's face was pale with exhaustion and fear. He sent out a short, desperate transmission. "They are coming." The message repeated over and over, lost in the noise of the celebration. Below, in the capital's Defense Command Center, an officer noticed the incoming transmission. He frowned, played it back, and tried to clean up the signal. All he could make out were those 3 words, "They are coming." He hesitated before passing it to his superior. The older officer listened once, shook his head, and said, "It's probably just a damaged relay from the outer rim." The message was filed away as unimportant. After all, the Zarnak were gone. Who else could threaten them? The scout ship, ignored by most, drifted into the docking ring. Its pilot stumbled out, his uniform torn and his eyes wide. He tried to speak to the dock workers, warning them of what he had seen. But the celebrations drowned out his voice, and no one paid him much attention. That night, the grand victory feast began in the High Hall. The council gathered with the fleet's top officers. Drinking fine wine and telling stories of glory, they spoke of new trade routes, rebuilding efforts, and the monuments they would build in honor of their heroes. No one spoke of the strange transmission. The idea of danger was unthinkable. They had won, and that was all that mattered. But in the far reaches of the system, the automated deep space sensors picked up something unusual. Multiple large signatures moving in tight formation. At first, the system labeled them as asteroids. But asteroids didn't move with such perfect precision. The AI recalculated, then marked them as unknown class. When the report reached the command center, it was met with frowns. "Probably just a glitch from the sensor recalibration," one technician muttered. Still, protocol demanded that the data be sent to the fleet's intelligence division. Hours later, as the last of the fireworks faded over Veralia, the technicians received an update. The asteroids were closing in, much faster than any natural object could travel. They were coming from deep, uncharted space. Their size was massive, larger than anything in the Coalition database. One tech whispered. To another, "That's no asteroid. That's a ship." The words sent a chill down their spines. By the time the report reached the council, the unknown fleet had already crossed into the outer defense perimeter. Still, the politicians refused to panic. "Send a greeting signal," one of them said calmly. "They will see our strength and come as friends." The transmission was sent, but no reply came. Instead, the unknown ships continued their silent approach. The hours ticked by, tension growing in the war rooms. Finally, the first long-range holographic image came through. The room fell silent. The ships were dark giants, their hulls covered in thick, angular armor. Massive cannons jutted from their sides, each one capable of leveling a city in a single strike. They moved with the slow, deliberate grace of predators, and on the lead ship, a single emblem gleamed under the distant starlight, a blue and white sphere with green continents. A veteran officer gasped, his voice shaking. That's Earth." The name was barely spoken in Coalition space anymore. Humans had been gone from the galactic stage for over a century. Some said they had been destroyed. Others claimed they had turned inward, abandoning the stars. But now, their ships were here, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The High Hall celebrations were still in full swing when the first warning sirens began to wail. Commander Larev turned to the main balcony, looking up at the sky. At first, he saw nothing but the glow of the city lights. Then a shadow began to spread across the stars. One of the Dreadnoughts had arrived in low orbit. Its size blotted out a quarter of the night sky. The music stopped, the cheers faded, and a heavy silence fell over the city. Above, the human Dreadnought hung in the darkness like a mountain made of steel. It did not fire. It did not move. It simply waited, a silent message in itself. The celebration was over. The storm had arrived. Unknown giants, the warning sirens echoed across the capital. But most people didn't understand why. Some thought it was part of the celebration, a final dramatic display to end the night. But in the command center, the mood had shifted from pride to fear. The massive ship above the city wasn't answering any signals. It just floated there, silent and still, as if watching. Admiral Kever stood in the center of the war room, staring at the live holographic feed. He could see the Dreadnought's surface, layer upon layer of thick metal armor. It had no visible weaknesses, no glowing energy cores, like Coalition ships. It was built for one purpose, and that purpose was war. Around him, officers whispered. Nervously, some recognized the emblem on the hull, the old Earth symbol, while others asked what Earth even was. For the younger generation, humanity was a myth, a name buried in forgotten war stories. The Admiral turned to his intelligence officer. "Tell me everything we have on humans." The officer swallowed hard, scrolling through old, locked archives. "Humans were part of the Galactic Council once. Over 100 years ago," he began. "They fought alongside the Coalition during the Rim Wars. But something happened. The room was silent, the tension so heavy that even the sound of fingers tapping the console felt loud. They were betrayed," the officer continued slowly. "Left behind during the final retreat. Abandoned to face the enemy alone." Kever's jaw tightened. "And they survived," he muttered, his eyes still fixed on the colossal ship. The fact that humans were here now meant they had not only survived, but thrived outside the city. Civilians pointed at the sky. Some filmed the Dreadnought with their holocoms, broadcasting images across the galaxy. The sight of the human warship spread fast, reaching every major world in minutes. Reactions were mixed: fear, curiosity, disbelief. The Coalition propaganda machines tried to spin the event as a friendly diplomatic visit, but few believed it. Meanwhile, the deep space sensors detected more signatures entering the system. 10 more Dreadnoughts, each as large as the first, moving in perfect formation. Their approach was slow but deliberate. Like a predator surrounding its prey, Admiral Kever clenched his fists. "This is no visit," he said coldly. "This is a show of force." The council convened an emergency session, their voices sharp and panicked. Some argued for immediate military action. Others said they should open communications and try to negotiate. But no one could deny the truth. If these Dreadnoughts attacked, there was nothing in the Coalition arsenal that could stop them. The strongest fleet in the galaxy suddenly felt small. Kever ordered the fleet's flagship, the Valiant Dawn, to prepare for launch. He didn't intend to attack, but he wanted to meet the humans face to face. If war was coming, he needed to know why. His officers moved quickly, but their faces betrayed their unease. They had all heard the same old stories. about human soldiers who fought like demons, about their ability to adapt, to improvise, to endure. And now they had ships that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. In the civilian districts, fear began to spread. Shops closed early. Families gathered in their homes, and people locked their doors, even though no one had landed yet. Something about the Dreadnoughts felt unnatural. It wasn't just their size. It was the way they moved, silent, calculated, patient, like they already knew they had won before the first shot was fired. On the bridge of the Valiant Dawn, Kevers, crew established a direct channel to the lead human ship. They sent out a formal greeting, the kind used for first contact situations. Minutes passed, but no reply came. Instead, the human ship adjusted its position slightly, turning its bow directly toward the Coalition fleet. The gesture was unmistakable, a challenge. Cover ordered all ships to hold position. His heart was steady, but his mind was racing. If humans had returned for revenge, there would be no stopping them. But if there was even a chance for peace, he had to try. Open a wideband channel. He commanded. His voice went across the system, carried to every human dreadnought. "This is Admiral Kever of the Galactic Coalition," he said. Asterisk. "We welcome you to our space and request a meeting to discuss your intentions." The words hung in the air, waiting for a reply. The reply came, but not in the way anyone expected. A deep, steady voice filled the comms. It was calm, but there was a weight behind it, a promise of violence. "We did not come here to talk," the voice said. "We came to remind you." The line went dead. In the war room, the council members exchanged uneasy glances. "Remind us of what?" One of them whispered. Admiral Kever already knew the answer. Humans hadn't forgotten the betrayal, and now their giants of steel had returned to settle the score. Above the capital, the first dreadnought began to move, its engines glowing. Faintly, it turned slowly, revealing the full scale of its weaponry to the city below. Then, far in the distance, the other 9 dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace, their arrival shaking the very fabric of space. The celebration that had filled the streets just hours ago was now replaced by fear, the galaxy's most powerful fleet was no longer the Coalition. It was the fleet that had just arrived. The first strike the sky over Viralia had never been so dark. The massive human dreadnoughts hung above the world like silent mountains, their armor swallowing the starlight. For hours, they had done nothing but hold position. The Coalition hoped it was intimidation, a show of power meant to force negotiations. But Admiral Kever knew better. Predators didn't circle forever. In the war room, tension was so thick it was hard to breathe. Every officer had their eyes fixed on the holographic display of the Dreadnought fleet. Kever stood at the center, arms folded, waiting for the inevitable. Then, without warning, the lead human ship moved. Its engines flared with a deep blue light, and the ship rotated slightly, aiming its weapons at the orbital defense grid. "Raise the shields." An officer shouted, but the command was pointless. The first volley came faster than the Coalition's sensors could track. Massive rail cannons roared, each shot slicing through space at impossible speed. The defense satellites exploded one by one, their debris scattering like sparks in the dark. The capital's shield generators activated, a shimmering dome of light wrapping the city. For a brief moment, people on the ground felt safe again. That safety lasted less than a minute. The dreadnoughts unleashed their second volley, this time targeting the shield emitters directly. The beams cut through the dome like paper, leaving the city exposed. On the streets, civilians screamed and ran for shelter. Sirens wailed across every district. Fire rained down from the sky as the Coalition's own ships tried to fight back. But their weapons barely scratched the dreadnought's armor. The humans moved with terrifying precision. They weren't destroying everything, only the key targets that would cripple the Coalition's ability to respond. From orbit, dropships began to detach from the human fleet. Small, fast, and heavily armored, They descended into the atmosphere like burning comets. Kever ordered all available fighter squadrons to intercept. The coalition pilots fought bravely, but the human escorts tore through them. Their weapons were unlike anything the coalition had ever seen. Self-guided rounds that adapted mid-flight, drones that shielded allied ships from incoming fire. Every tactic the coalition tried was countered instantly. In the command center, reports came in rapid succession. Sector 6 power grid offline. Military docks destroyed. Central comes down. It was a disaster unfolding in real time, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Kever slammed his fist against the table. "They're dismantling us piece by piece," he growled. It wasn't an all-out slaughter. It was surgical. The humans were removing the coalition's ability to fight back before delivering the killing blow. One of the human dropships landed near the planetary command center. From it emerged squads of human soldiers in dark, angular armor. They moved quickly and without hesitation. Coalition troops tried to form defensive lines, but the humans broke through with brutal efficiency. Their weapons were small compared to coalition rifles, but far deadlier. Every shot found its mark. Every move was calculated, and they didn't waste time. Once an area was secured, they moved on to the next without hesitation. Inside the command center, Kever could hear the gunfire getting closer. He knew they would be here within minutes. "Fall back to the inner chamber," he ordered his guards. But deep down, he knew there was no safe place left on Veralia. Suddenly, the building's main screen lit up with a transmission. The face of a human appeared, an older man with sharp eyes and a calm expression. He wore no rank insignia, but his presence demanded attention. "This is Admiral Rourke of the Terran Dreadnought fleet," he said. His voice was steady, almost casual. "You celebrated too soon." Kever stepped forward, staring into the man's eyes. "What do you want?" he demanded. Rourke's expression didn't change. "What was denied to us a century ago?" he replied. "Justice." The transmission ended, and seconds later the lights in the command center went out. The emergency systems kicked in, bathing the room in red light. Outside, the sound of heavy footsteps and gunfire grew louder. The humans were coming, and nothing could stop them. Above the planet, the Dreadnoughts held their silent watch. More coalition ships tried to enter the system to help, but human war groups intercepted them before they could get close. Every path of escape was sealed. It was no longer a battle. It was an execution, and the galaxy was watching. Asterisk. Ground invasion. The streets of Veralia shook under the landing gear of human dropships. They came down like falling meteors, their armored hulls glowing from the heat of re-entry. Hatches burst open, and squads of human soldiers poured out. They moved with machine-like precision, sweeping through streets, plazas, and alleys without hesitation. Coalition ground forces scrambled to respond. Their soldiers were brave, but they were used to fighting enemies who followed predictable tactics. The humans didn't. One moment they were in the open, exchanging fire, and the next they vanished into side streets, flanking from impossible angles. Coalition commanders shouted for regrouping, but by the time orders reached the front lines, positions had already been lost. From the top of a damaged tower, Admiral Kever watched the battle unfold. He saw his troops being pushed back block by block. The humans didn't destroy everything. They were selective. Military checkpoints were taken apart, communication hubs dismantled, and power stations shut down. It was as if they had studied the city for years, knowing exactly which arteries to cut to make the whole body go limp. In the market district, civilians huddled in doorways and behind stalls. They expected the humans to fire on them, but the soldiers ignored them completely. This wasn't a war against the people. It was a war against the coalition's authority. Even children noticed it, whispering to each other as the armored figures passed. At the planetary command bunker, the last line of defense prepared for impact. Heavy doors sealed shut. Automated turrets armed themselves. The soldiers inside braced for a long siege. But the humans didn't attack head-on. Instead, a squad infiltrated through an old maintenance tunnel, bypassing the main defenses entirely. By the time the alarms went off, the humans were already inside, moving swiftly and silently. Kever's communicator buzzed. "Sir, they're in the bunker," a voice said, panicked. Kever gritted his teeth. "Hold your ground." But the transmission cut off before he could finish, replaced by static inside. The bunker. Human soldiers moved like shadows. They used stun rounds and sonic pulses to disable rather than kill. Their goal was control, not massacre. Within minutes, the entire facility was under human command. On the streets, the coalition's resistance collapsed. Troops laid down their weapons, their leaders captured or cut off from command. The humans began deploying strange devices at key points in the city, small black towers that pulsed with low, steady hums. No one knew what they were for, but Kever suspected they were part of a larger plan. The Council tried to send a message to the wider coalition, but all long-range comms were down. Every attempt to use backup transmitters failed. The humans had jammed every channel. It was as if Viralia had been cut off from the galaxy entirely. In one district, a young lieutenant named Viren watched as a group of human soldiers secured a transport hub. He couldn't help but notice their discipline. No unnecessary movements, no wasted shots, no shouting, only silent hand signals and coordinated advances. He realized then that this wasn't just a military operation. It was a statement. By nightfall, most of Virelia's major military sites were under human control. The Dreadnoughts remained in low orbit, their weapons silent but ready. The coalition still had ships elsewhere in the galaxy, but Kever knew they wouldn't make it here in time. Even if they did, they'd be walking into a trap. In the war room of the seized bunker, human officers spread out holographic maps of the planet. They marked captured zones, planned supply drops, and organized shifts for maintaining control. The efficiency was unsettling. It was like watching a well-rehearsed performance. Kever, now a prisoner, was brought before the human leader, Admiral Rourke. Rourke studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You built your strength on betrayal," he said quietly, "and now you're going to live with the consequences." Kever didn't reply, not because he had nothing to say, but because deep down he feared the Admiral might be right. The humans hadn't come here to destroy them in rage. They had come to dismantle them, piece by piece, until nothing of the old power remained. Above, the Dreadnoughts adjusted their positions. A silent warning to anyone watching from orbit that the humans were in complete control. The galaxy had heard whispers of humanity's return for years, but tonight, those whispers had become a deafening truth. Earth was back, and the rules of war had changed forever. Asterisk. The truth about the Dreadnoughts, the war room inside the captured bunker was quiet, except for the low hum of the human equipment. Coalition officers sat with their hands bound, watching the humans work. There was no shouting, no chaos. Every movement of the Terran soldiers was calm and controlled. It felt less like an invasion, and more like the final stage of a plan that had been waiting for decades. Admiral Kever sat across from Admiral Rourke. The human's face was unreadable, his voice calm. "You've been wondering why we came," Rourke began. Kever didn't respond, but his silence was answer enough. Rourke leaned forward, his eyes steady. "A century ago, we fought side by side in the Rim Wars," he said. "You called us allies, brothers in arms." Kever remembered the history, at least the version the Coalition told. According to the official record, humans had withdrawn from the galaxy after the war. No one questioned it, but Rourke's voice cut through that lie like a blade. "When the enemy closed in, we sent for help." He said, "You promised reinforcements. You promised to hold the line with us." His gaze hardened. "But you abandoned us, left our fleets surrounded, left our people to burn." The room was silent, even the Coalition officers who had studied. History didn't know this version of events. Kever's mouth was dry. That isn't in our records, he said slowly. Rourke's lips curled into a bitter smile. Of course it isn't. The victors always rewrite the history books. He stood and gestured toward a hologram that filled the room. It was an image of the Dreadnoughts, their massive frames outlined against the stars. These ships were born from that betrayal, Rourke said. They were not built for conquest. They were built to ensure no one could ever betray us again. The hologram shifted, showing the internal structure of a dreadnought. Layer upon layer of armor, reactor cores shielded in multiple failsafes, weapon arrays larger than cities. Coalition officers stared, unable to comprehend how any civilization could produce such machines in secret. These ships are the result of 100 years of planning, of refusing to die, Rourke continued. We built them in the dark, far from your eyes, in the ruins you left us. One of the younger Coalition officers spoke up. Why come back now? He asked. Rourke's answer was immediate. Because you've grown comfortable. Because you've forgotten what war really is. Because you celebrated while we buried our dead. The words landed like a blow. Kever felt the weight of them. Not just as an admiral, but as a man. Rourke's tone didn't change, but there was a coldness now. This is not revenge for the sake of blood, he said. This is balance, a reminder to the galaxy that Earth may be patient. But we do not forget. Outside, the dreadnoughts slowly repositioned in orbit. From the ground, they looked like black storms ready to break. Rourke activated a live broadcast that carried his voice across the entire planet. This is Admiral Rourke of the Terran Dreadnought Fleet, he said. Your leaders built their power on lies, on the graves of our people. We have returned to strip away that power. The speech sent shockwaves through the population. Some didn't believe it. Others whispered that it explained the humans' terrifying precision. Kever knew the truth now. The humans weren't here just to win. They were here to make. Sure, no one would ever dare betray them again. In the bunker, Rourke turned back to Kever. You still have ships out there, he said. You could call them. Try to rally a defense. Try to fight us head on. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But you know what will happen if you do. Kever met his gaze, and for the first time felt the full weight of humanity's return. They hadn't come with diplomacy, and they hadn't come to slaughter. Without purpose, they had come with a message carved into steel and fire, one the galaxy would never forget. Outside, the black towers the humans had planted earlier began to activate. They emitted a low-frequency pulse that rolled across the planet. Every Coalition military system connected to the network went dark. Their weapons were useless now. The humans had not only taken the planet, they had taken its ability to fight ever again. Rourke didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply gave the order to maintain planetary lockdown. The first stage of their plan was complete, but Kever couldn't shake the feeling that something even larger was coming. Above Viralia, the dreadnoughts floated in perfect formation, silent, patient, unstoppable, the galaxy's most feared war machines, and the product of a century-old wound that had never healed. The fall of the fleet in the outer reaches of the Viralia system. The last remaining Coalition battle groups were gathering, dozens of capital ships, hundreds of escorts, all converging on a single point. From their viewports, the dreadnoughts in orbit looked far away, almost small against the vast black of space. But every captain knew the truth. Size meant nothing compared to the power they carried. Admiral Tharvos, commander of the relief fleet, stood on the bridge of the Radiant Spear. His orders were simple: break through the human blockade, reach the capital, and drive them out. He believed it was possible. He believed numbers would be their advantage, but he didn't know that Rourke had been expecting him. High above Viralia, the Terran dreadnoughts slowly adjusted their formation. Sensors locked onto the incoming Coalition fleet. No words were exchanged between human commanders, only silent data streams, cold, precise, absolute. In the bunker below, Admiral Kever watched the tactical display. He knew Tharvos was walking into a death trap. "Call them back," he told Rourke. The human admiral didn't even turn his head. "They made their choice," he replied. "Now they'll learn what that choice costs." The battle began before the coalition ships could even enter firing range. From beyond their sensors' limits, the dreadnoughts opened fire. Rail cannons launched hypervelocity rounds that struck with the force of meteors. One shot tore through the Vigilant Star, splitting the ship in half before anyone could react. Another volley crippled 2 destroyers in a single pass. The coalition fleet surged forward anyway, returning fire with everything they had. Beams of energy and swarms of missiles streaked across the void, but against the dreadnoughts' layered armor, it was like throwing stones at a mountain. The humans barely shifted position, absorbing the attack like it was nothing. Then came the drones, thousands of small, autonomous war machines launched from hidden bays. They moved like a living storm, swarming over enemy ships. Some disabled weapons. Others cut through hull plating. In minutes, the coalition's formation began to fracture. Ships broke ranks, retreating in all directions. On the Radiant Spear, alarms screamed as the hull shook under repeated impacts. Tharvos barked orders, trying to keep the fleet together, but every maneuver they tried, the humans countered instantly. It was as if they already knew the coalition's playbook, because they did. Rourke's fleet had studied their tactics for decades. Waiting for this moment, the dreadnought Titan's Wrath moved forward alone. Its main cannon glowed with a deep, burning light. One shot, and the Radiant Spear was gone. No explosion, no debris, just a flash. And then empty space. From the capital, Kever watched the red icons of the coalition fleet vanish one by one. The system's defense network fell silent. Even the council, huddled in their sealed chamber, could no longer deny the truth. The coalition fleet, the greatest military power in the galaxy, was gone. In the cold black of space, the survivors scattered. Some fled into hyperspace without coordinates, desperate to escape. Others shut down their weapons and sent surrender codes. The dreadnoughts did not pursue those who fled. They didn't need to. The message had already been delivered. Rourke stood on the bridge of his flagship, hands clasped behind his back. "Status?" he asked. "All coalition ships eliminated or routed," his second-in-command replied. "No losses on our side." There was no cheer, no celebration among the human crews. This was not a victory to them. It was an inevitability. For 100 years they had prepared for this day, and now it was only a step in a larger plan. Kever sat in silence. He had fought in dozens of battles, seen fleets rise and fall, but never like this. This wasn't war. It was domination. A lesson written in fire across the stars. As the last remnants of the coalition fleet disappeared into hyperspace, the dreadnoughts turned back toward Viralia. They moved as one, silent and unstoppable. The shadow of their return stretched across the galaxy. Every world watching the broadcasts knew the same thing. Earth was no longer just a memory. It was the most dangerous power alive. Asterisk, the new order of the war was over before most of the galaxy even realized it had begun. Above Viralia, the human dreadnoughts floated in silent formation, their shadows stretching across the planet. The coalition's once mighty fleet was gone, its leaders captured, its defenses shattered. The capital city lay under full Terran control, but there was no looting, no chaos. The humans had taken everything. Without destroying it, Admiral Rourke stood on the balcony of the seized command bunker. Looking over the city, coalition soldiers, now unarmed, were being escorted into holding areas. Civilians watched in silence from windows and rooftops, unsure whether to fear or hope. For the first time in a century, the word Earth was spoken openly in the streets. Whispered at first, then louder. Some said it with fear, others with awe. In the council's former chamber, the remaining leaders sat across from Rourke, Their voices were quiet now, stripped of the arrogance they had shown days earlier. "What will you do with us?" one counselor finally asked. Rourke's answer was calm, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. "You will govern your worlds," he said, "but not your armies." The council didn't understand at first, so Rourke explained. "All major military fleets will be dismantled. All weapons capable of planetary assault will be surrendered. Your worlds will sign the Pact of No Aggression." One counselor frowned. "And if we refuse?" Rourke met his gaze without blinking. "Then we stay," he said simply. "Above." The dreadnoughts slowly shifted position, one of them descending lower until its presence filled the horizon. It was a reminder that the humans didn't need to occupy a planet to control it. One ship was enough. Across the galaxy, broadcasts of the event spread like wildfire. Every world saw the same images: human warships blotting out suns, entire fleets falling in minutes, and a calm, unshaken admiral giving orders. No one mistook this for a conquest. It was a statement. Rourke allowed coalition leaders to return to their worlds under strict conditions. Each would leave knowing they had been spared, but also knowing why. "This is not mercy," he told them. "This is memory. You will tell your children what you saw. You will tell your allies what happened, and you will remember that. Earth's patience has limits." In the civilian districts, Terran engineers dismantled their black pulse towers. They left behind no permanent bases, no occupying soldiers, only the fear of their return. For many, that fear would be enough to keep the galaxy in check for generations. Before leaving, Rourke met Admiral Kever one last time. The coalition officer had been treated with a strange respect, not as an equal, but as someone who understood the truth. "You could have wiped us out," Kever said quietly. Rourke nodded. "Yes," he replied, "but then you'd be martyrs, and martyrs are dangerous." Kever studied him for a moment. "And what are we now?" he asked. Rourke's expression was unreadable. "A warning," he said. The human fleet began its departure. Engines flared as the dreadnoughts rose higher, their vast frames reflecting the light of Virilia's sun. One by one, they vanished into hyperspace, leaving the system as quietly as they had arrived. But the silence they left behind was not peace. It was the heavy, unshakable knowledge that the galaxy was no longer the same. On worlds far from Virilia, children would look up at the stars differently now. Merchants would speak carefully when making deals with human traders, and military leaders would glance nervously at their tactical maps, because everyone knew that somewhere, out beyond the edge of known space, the Terran dreadnought fleet still waited in the archives of the Coalition. A new entry was made that day. It was not a treaty, not a battle report. It was a single line, placed at the very top of the threat index. It read, "Do not provoke Earth." The galaxy had seen many empires rise and fall, but the humans were something different. They didn't conquer for territory, and they didn't fight for resources. They fought for memory, for the ghosts of their dead, and in that they were unstoppable. As the last Terran dreadnought slipped into the black, Admiral Kever stood on the balcony and watched it disappear. He didn't know if they would ever come back, but he knew one thing. If they did, no one would be ready. The new order had begun, and it had only one law: never forget Earth, **.